Hello there. Welcome into the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the 100% free Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. I am back from San Jose, and then tomorrow I will be heading to Vegas. But I am back in studio today with a veritable cornucopia of sports topics, but mostly Broncos over the course of the program. And on a day like today, any day is good to hear from you, but feel like today even more so is what this medium is all about, sports talk radio. So fire away with your thoughts. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show. I'm not surprised by what happened yesterday, and you shouldn't be either. A team whose best win of the season was against Tampa Bay in week 3, 4, whose entire identity was based around the idea of we beat bad teams and lose to good ones, was never going to go into Buffalo against that team, not just a playoff team, a Super Bowl contender with perhaps the MVP on it, and win that game. And one thing that I kept thinking throughout that game, I wonder if you were thinking this as well. I'm listening to Tony Romo, and Tony Romo has been known on occasion to try and keep you watching, right? I don't know if it's just his natural way of doing things, or he's being told by CBS, like, make sure that you keep people engaged, don't lose them. But he kept talking about how the longer the game goes, with the score being close, the more confidence the Denver Broncos would get, with the natural leap from there being, well, they could potentially win this game. I don't know about you. Outside of a brief fleeting moment after Troy Franklin caught that touchdown, did I ever entertain the possibility that the Denver Broncos were going to win that game? And I don't even know that I felt that way really after Troy Franklin caught that pass. I was like, that's a great start. Great play calling. I don't know that I was like, wait, are the Broncos going to win this game? I was watching that game yesterday, and it reminded me of the Cincinnati game. You know, when you keep allowing a team to get near or into the red zone, right on the doorstep, and even if you stop them from getting into the end zone, the feeling I had watching yesterday was the same feeling I had against Cincinnati. Not that the Broncos are doing their part to hold their own and they're going to flip this game at some point. I was thinking, when's the dam going to break? You can't keep letting a team get right up on the doorstep of scoring touchdowns and expect all of a sudden that's just going to stop. More likely, especially against a team like Buffalo, it's going to go the other way, and you're not going to be able to get those stops. And they're going to get into the end zone, which is exactly what happened. And the thing was, they didn't even use Josh Allen that much. Like, I know what his final stats look like. A lot of that was just him landing the knockout blow. It was James Cook that the Broncos couldn't stop. So like in a video game, you have like in Mortal Kombat, Nintendo 64 Mortal Kombat, Shao Kahn was the final boss. You had to get there. And he was incredibly difficult to beat, but that's who you're striving for. If Josh Allen went out there from quarter 1 to quarter 4 and just lit it up and looked every bit the MVP, then I think you take that game a different way and kind of tip your cap and go, well, the guy's the freaking MVP. What ultimately did in the Denver Broncos and what gave you the thought that they weren't going to turn that game anytime soon was because they couldn't even get to that final boss. It was the penultimate boss. It was in that game, it was Motaro, this centaur looking dude. He was the guy before the guy. The Broncos the Bills didn't even need to use Josh Allen. They chose to, and you have to ask the question, were the Bills running up the score for some reason? They had that game they were in complete command of that football game. And they only used Josh Allen to land those knockout blows. That was it. The bulk of the work was done by James Cook, and the Broncos were powerless to stop him. This defense has been exposed the last month and a half. Okay, a lot of the Denver Broncos as a whole, I think, got exposed quite a bit down the stretch of the season, but especially the defense. And it wasn't just, Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Josh Allen. The Colts did almost whatever they wanted against the Denver Broncos defense. Jameis Winston threw for like 400 yards. I'm not saying that the offense is blameless at all for yesterday, or that we didn't see the Broncos offense and Bo Nix regress a little bit towards the end of the season. They absolutely did. But at no point did anyone ever label the Broncos offense or Bo Nix elite. Rookie of the year? Maybe. Playing beyond his years? Absolutely. No one ever labeled them elite. The Broncos were viewed as an elite defense, and they got shredded for a month and a half against teams that weren't as good as Buffalo, but presented some of those same problems. And even teams that you would never expect, like the Browns and the Colts. If you want to talk about fool's gold, if you want to talk about fraudulent, if you want to throw around words and phrases like that, look at the defense. Don't look at the offense. We'll talk more about the offense, but like, would they have 5 possessions? Like, what are they supposed to do? That's the thing. What was the Broncos offense supposed to do? Given the hand they were dealt by the defense, the time of possession being what it was, the number of drives, the inability to keep Buffalo off the scoreboard. Like, what was Bo Nix and Sean Payne in the offense supposed to do? If you want a representation, and I said going into this game that, and I'm not. The season was a success, okay? If you need me to get that out of the way right off the top, I will. It was still a successful season in Denver. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They got into the playoffs. That's what they had to do, given the way they set themselves up. They got there. Success. Boom. What yesterday was to show, okay, how far are they away from that next step? And my goodness, they are far away. And to me, what encapsulates that is not the offense, it's the defense. How are the Denver Broncos supposed to take the next step and be a contending team if they look the way they did for the last 5 of their last 6 games, taking out the one game that they played the Chiefs JV squad? That's what's been exposed. And this is a defense that built a reputation on multiple games against the Raiders, a game against the Saints. They were one of the last defenses Kirk Cousins will ever face as a member of the Atlanta Falcons. They were able to slow down the Jets in the pouring rain. Like, these are the games they built that reputation on. And then when it really mattered the most, when the Denver Broncos really needed the defense to at least be what people thought they were, elite, to at least keep the game manageable, they couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And they haven't been able to do it against any team over the last 2 months that you would hold in any close to level of high regard. The natural inclination of people this offseason is going to be, oh, you got to get Bo Nix weapons. And sure, they need to do a little bit of that. And we'll talk about that. But again, to show how far this team is away, look at what the Bills offense did to the Broncos defense. The one part of this team that you thought was as close to a finished product as it could be. You know, Bo Nix has a lot of improvements to make, and you can reasonably assume he will improve. The defense was supposed to be ready to rock and roll. Multiple All-Pros, elite defense. Hot knife through butter. And it was James Cook. James Cook was the knife. So if yesterday was a glimpse into the separation between this young, plucky, upstart Broncos team that got enough wins to be invited to a playoff that has been unnecessarily and needlessly expanded, to then get to that next level to be taken seriously in the AFC, well, you have your evidence yesterday of how far they are. Adjust your wish list, your draft boards accordingly. They are not close to that level. And probably never should have been looked at on that level, but some did. And the one aspect of this team that many people thought would be able to at least hold their own in Buffalo yesterday was the defense. And they were as bad as they had been over the last month and a half. And they've been pretty bad. And now Vance Joseph's interview. I don't know that you could go from as in demand a head coaching candidate to whatever Vance Joseph is. Who's going to make Vance Joseph their head coach? His defense couldn't even hold up the last month and a half of the season. His defense got embarrassed yesterday. Who's making him their head coach? To me, the defense was the big takeaway yesterday. How they were as woefully outmanned and outgunned as the offense was. Take your thoughts. We're going to go in a lot of different directions. I'll take my cues from you. 719-24-7. 13-13. Let's talk about the offense. Bo Nix, Sean Payton, the whole lot. We'll do that next here on Extra Sports 1300. Said there was a chance that yesterday could have all the makings of Tim Tebow going into Foxborough all those years ago. And that's exactly what it was. The Denver Broncos outclassed in every possible way they could have against the Buffalo Bills, as they are one and done in the postseason. And no one's going to be eating any crow around here. From the 719, sorry, Kaufman, the truckload of crow is going back to the staging area. I'm ripping back your free beer. 140 yards and a touchdown from Captain Smug ain't cutting it. The Broncos are strictly, I'm a big boy now, JV outfit, nothing better. But the prevailing theme of today's show is this is who they've been the whole time. Like, I really legitimately don't think people should be shocked by yesterday. For weeks, and I said this on Friday, this team has become incredibly predictable in terms of who they're going to be and who they're going to lose to. They have established themselves as the best of the rest. They're not a contender. To say they're a playoff team in the same way, and that's why I balked at the question that was asked to Bo Nix about him being mentioned with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes. Like, dude, he's not there, and this team's not there. There are levels to this. But the NFL felt like it wanted to let 7 teams in. That's their prerogative. So there was a spot out there for anybody else to take. And to the Broncos' credit, they took it. They did exactly what they needed to do to take that last spot, which was beat every mediocre or poor team or team resting all their starters that they had on their schedule to get to the postseason. And they earned their spot in the postseason. And I can pound the table all day long, and I have since the moment it got instituted. We do not need 7 teams. We don't. There aren't enough good teams. But there's a spot available. The rules allowed it. The Broncos, to their credit, did exactly what they needed to do. And something that, quite frankly, I and many people did not feel they were even good enough to do that. Right? The people that know, the people who have built the palaces that sit in the desert of Nevada said that the Broncos would win 5.5 games. Or wouldn't win any more, in layman's terms, wouldn't win more 6 or more games. They far outpaced expectations, but they did it by standing on the shoulders of the lesser teams in the NFL. Just because you're doing that doesn't mean you're tall enough to stand next to Kansas City and Buffalo and Baltimore and whatever other team you want to throw into that mix. There are levels to this. You know who else showed that they weren't? Green Bay, other 7 seed. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, there are levels. Broncos are at one level, which is not close to the next level. And that's what they're going to have to start working on. But again, I've laid very little of yesterday at the feet of Bo Nix and Sean Payton. I don't, and maybe I should. Maybe I should be more critical. I'm not. I watched that game, and I was like, what are they supposed to do? They went right down the field, drive 1, and scored. And from there, the Buffalo Bills did actually exactly what the Broncos were supposed to do, or we were urging the Broncos to do, in order to have a chance to win that game. Right? Run the ball, control time of possession, keep the other team's offense off the field. All the things that the Broncos needed to do in order to win that game, Buffalo did. Buffalo took the air out of the football. This Broncos offense is not, and you could point at the touchdown pass to Troy Franklin all you want. This is an offense that needs time. They kind of got to get going a little bit most of the time. They need more plays. They need more drives. They need more time. They're not quick strike, bang, bang, we're in the red zone. And they were just not afforded any of that. So I look at Bo Nix and the way he played, and I'm like, it's about how I would expect under the conditions he was playing in. It's still noteworthy and still impressive that Sean Payton and Bo Nix did enough in year one to get to this point. But the defense gave Bo Nix and Sean Payton no chance. And that's my biggest takeaway from yesterday. Tucker says the Broncos played a last place schedule. Nick saw what it's like to play against a good team. 6 years of college ball doesn't represent the NFL. He'll get better, but it'll take a while. And that's the mixed emotion of a Monday like today. Right? I'm not trying to talk anybody out of their position that this year was anything less than a success and a smashing success. You got to the postseason with a rookie quarterback and one of the lesser rookie quarterbacks. There was another rookie quarterback. You saw, if you watched that game last night, you know Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are not the same. Okay, but they're not supposed to be. Jaden Daniels was the number 2 overall pick, and Bo Nix was considered by many a reach at 12. This was a successful season, and I will continue to pepper it in throughout the show today because it was. But the Broncos were actually done in a way a favor by Buffalo because any fan base, especially one that was as starved for success as the Broncos fan base, you can get a little delusional. And it happens to everybody. This team is a long way off, and automatically they are a prime regression candidate. Right? Look at their schedule next year. Teams are going to have a full season of Bo Nix film to look at. They're going to be one of those teams that others will look at and say, when they ask the question, which playoff team is not going to make it this year, the Broncos are going to be on a lot of those lists. And it will be up to George Paton in the draft. It will be up to both Paytons in free agency. It will be up to Bo Nix to make sure that doesn't happen, to continue to keep this thing moving forward. But you saw this with the Avalanche and the Nuggets. It took them years of getting into the playoffs before they were a real contender. Why should the Broncos be any different with a rookie quarterback, no less? This is a rebuilding team that far exceeded expectations. And there is a long way for them to go to get to really where the Broncos hope to be, where Sean Payton took this job to eventually get. And that's to AFC championships. That's to Super Bowls. So they got a long way to go. And that's what yesterday was. From the 719, is from Steve. Hey, Ryan, tough loss, but a nice step forward for the Broncos. Short, succinct, perfect. I mean, it was a little bit more than tough. It was an outright it was bordering on embarrassment yesterday. So to be fair, it was a little bit more than a tough loss, but come on. Where this team was supposed to be, they overachieved for sure. But I'm telling you, watch them with their first pick go defense. Because what you saw this year is that when Sean Payton has the appropriate amount of drives and time, he can spin something out of not a lot. Right? I don't, you know what I'm getting at. This Broncos team desperately needs a running back. They probably need better wide receivers. You're not, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to get all that done this offseason. And I would expect the Broncos to look at the defensive side of the football and to truly get their defense, try to get their defense to the point that it can hold them in these kind of games. Because they didn't keep them in the game against Baltimore. They could not get a stop against Cincinnati. But we saw this, the sophomore slump, whatever you want to call it, that's what Bo Nix is going to have to fight against. And the Broncos can help him out by getting a running back, but forget the Ashton Genties of the world. He's going to be long gone. And the Broncos shouldn't do that. But you saw it again with Sean Payton and Bo Nix. Like, the flashes were there, right? That first drive. The drive before Will Lutz doinked the field goal. I mean, it's there. There's enough there to go on. And there's no question since that 4-game cameo from Drew Lock, where you have no question about the Broncos quarterback going into next year. None. Zero. Won't even be an open competition. And getting that right, getting the quarterback and head coach that fit together was what made all the difference for this team. But yesterday, they had no shot. Because the Buffalo Bills just wrapped themselves around the Broncos like a boa constrictor and squeezed the life out of them. Couple drop passes. You deactivate Audric Estime for the game. Like, the offense needs some work. But so does the defense. And I think that's kind of where I think the Broncos are going to look early and then try to, rely. This is part of why you pay Sean Payton more than any other coach not named Andy Reid, to do more with less. And he did that this year. So give him a little bit more, see what he could do. But I look to the defense. I got some major questions about that defense after the way they finished this season. 719-247-1313. Continuing on, reacting to the Broncos' loss to the Bills, of course. Other playoff games went on, and there were certainly some takeaways from those as well. We'll get to those here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. Reacting mostly to the Broncos and Bills from the wild card weekend, but there were certainly other games. And I will say this about the Denver Broncos situation. At least you can say after this season that the arrow is pointing up. Right? Like it's reasonable to think that they are going to get better. Right? The Russell Wilson dead cap number will eventually be gone. They have their premium draft picks, which they've had to sink into Russell Wilson, and then Sean Payton to fix Russell Wilson, only to cut Russell Wilson. Now you have that kind of stuff back at your disposal. There's a reason to think that the Broncos can improve from what they were this year. The Broncos, though, for years were stuck in that kind of no man's land where they're not good enough to go up, but they're not bad enough to go down. What do you do if you're the Steelers? Because if the Broncos were in many ways embarrassed yesterday, and I think they were, I mean, what do you say about the Steelers? Yes, against one of the small group of teams that can win a Super Bowl, but a team in your own division, team you got to match up with twice a year. That all that stuff about Lamar Jackson struggling with the Steelers, that's gone now. That's the one thing you had. You didn't know why Lamar Jackson struggled against the Steelers, but for some reason he did, and now that's gone. You don't even have that anymore. And what do? How do you extricate yourself out of this no man's land? And it's a better place within the no man's land because they keep going to the playoffs or they keep having winning records. I get it. It's not the 7-9 BS that Jeff Fisher used to talk about, but like how do you improve this football team? I think if we've learned anything over the last year or so with the NFL, specifically with the Denver Broncos, you need to do something quite drastic. Okay? And letting Russell Wilson walk is not a drastic move. I think if you're the Steelers, I think you need to see which team is willing to give you a John Gruden-esque return for Mike Tomlin. I know that Mike Tomlin's not the problem, but when you need to improve yourself, sometimes you have to give up something that is good about your team. And I think overall, Mike Tomlin is good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think many other coaches would consistently get this team to a winning record. And for that, he deserves credit. But he clearly is not taking this team any further than where he's been taking them. That is abundantly clear. Without some kind of major shakeup on the roster, like at the quarterback position. And how are you going to accomplish that? You're going to sit back at 21, 22, wherever they're drafting? This quarterback class could be done after the first two picks, and that'll be a wrap. If the top two teams go Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, that's it. There are no more quarterbacks even worth talking about. And the Steelers are the antithesis of what I'm talking about. I'm saying they need to make a drastic move. When's the last time the Pittsburgh Steelers have done anything other than status quo and what's safe? Because they fear the bottom dropping out. And they can't let that happen. They can't let the bottom drop out. It would be unbecoming of the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to have a 4-win season, a 5-win season. But that's what they need. And what I would counter with is that more unbecoming than a proud franchise that gets embarrassed at the hands of their division rival in the first round of the playoffs? Is it more unbecoming than getting whenever you get to that where the math's going to work out that you're going to be have a winning record, absolutely going down the tubes and collapsing in the last month of the season as they have? I get it. You can't. The moment you fire Mike Tomlin, he's going to get another job. Absolutely. So you got to trade him. You got to do exactly what happened to Gruden. Because you're right. If you're a Steelers fan, you can't just fire Mike Tomlin. You have to get something in return. And there are a lot of teams that Mike Tomlin could do a lot of good for. And I look at Mike McCarthy the same way, who apparently is now not going to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys anymore. That news broke today. Like, those guys could do wonders for a team like Jacksonville or Vegas. Right? But those two guys, their Super Bowls are ancient history, and they're never getting back there. So if I'm the Steelers, and I don't know what you can get, I was just playing around in my head with Jacksonville. Like, what if Jacksonville, they say, you know what, we have Trevor Lawrence. Yes, we need other things, but at least we have our quarterback. Would they give up the 6th pick for Mike Tomlin? Are they that desperate to get it right? And then if you're the Steelers, you could take the top 2 picks, look at the next year and say, we want to get into the Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders business? Or do you trade Mike Tomlin to get the ancillary pieces that you need and you roll with Justin Fields, which they should have been doing all along? And then at least right? At least you play out the season, no matter what way it goes, then you're like, okay, we fixed Justin Fields or we didn't. And now you're sitting there and saying, well, we rode with Russell Wilson just so we could have our winning record, and he collapsed with the rest of us. We know he's not the answer, but we still don't know if Justin Fields is, because we didn't give him a chance, because at the first moment that Russell Wilson was ready, we went back to him because we were so deathly afraid that we would have a losing record. I think Steelers got to do something drastic. That's the only way. They got to tank, or whatever the NFL version of tanking is, and just, take your lumps, sell off your veteran players for draft picks, get bad and see if you could get in the Arch Manning sweepstakes next year. But that doesn't sound like them at all. So make a shrewd front office move. Trade one of the few assets that you actually have of value and get something for him. Mike Tomlin. Maybe it doesn't net you a quarterback. But obviously, there are other places that the Steelers need to address on their team. The quarterback will be the quickest way for them to improve, but there are other needs. Roll with Justin Fields next year and go get another wide receiver, one that won't try to fight people at the end of every possession, like a wide receiver with his head screwed on straight. Like, I don't know. Can't just run it back. And they can't go bargain bin shopping. So they got to do some. Again, with the Broncos, at least the arrow is pointing up. With the Steelers, it's either pointed down or to the side. And then you have the Chargers. Right? And you have Justin Herbert. You have your quarterback. You have him locked up. It's now 2 games, 2 playoff games where you've been favored going in. And you have completely wet the bed in those 2 games. I couldn't believe what I was watching with with Justin Herbert. Shouldn't mention the Steelers and the Chargers so close together or get the Justins mixed up. Justin Herbert. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And this is a guy that I was like, just wait till he gets the right coaching. Just wait till he doesn't have Brandon Staley. And man, that was awful. Is that improved by just getting more weapons? Ladd McConkey set like the rookie record for a playoff game. Like, how many more weapons do you need? Justin Herbert just absolutely lost his mind. So this weekend was not so much about the teams that won. It was absolutely about the teams that lost. And where they're at and where they're going. Chargers could say, you know what, year 1 under Harbaugh, we can improve. And maybe there's some truth to that, but you're not improving at the quarterback position. That's your dude. I like Justin Herbert. And I think that's the thing that keeps him from getting criticized the same way that some of these other quarterbacks do. He's just so likable. But, dude, you can't go into that game and perform the way Justin Herbert did. And Chargers went through that, right? They had a quarterback for a very long time that was as talented as anybody in the league, put up big numbers, and just when they got to where they wanted to be, the postseason, it just didn't work. And I did say, as much as I like Herbert, I did say, we're going to find out how much of what has happened to the Chargers in recent years was truly on Brandon Staley and how much was it on Justin Herbert. I didn't expect it to end this way for the Chargers. But I also said, Justin Herbert's got to do it because there's no more Brandon Staley protecting him. Everybody was criticized Brandon Staley, and rightly so. I mean, I'm not saying let's play revisionist history and Brandon Staley got a raw deal. That dude should have been fired long before he actually did. But we're going to find out how much of the Chargers coming up short in big games was actually on Staley or on Herbert. And there was no Brandon Staley in Houston. And nobody's certainly pointing the finger at Jim Harbaugh. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on all the NFL playoff action. One more game tonight. I think it should be a good one. Rams-Vikings. You can hear that right here on Extra Sports 1300. In the meantime, I don't understand what people were hoping for with the Broncos offense yesterday. But I've read so much and seen so much disappointment over what Sean Payton and Bo Nix did. And I just got to say, what did you expect them to do? Welcome in Drive Time Sports. The day after the Broncos playoff run came to an end, you could watch the show live on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube at XTRA Sports 1300. Tonight, one more wild card game. The Vikings and the Rams. Our coverage from Westwood One starts at 5:30. I don't know what people were hoping for from the Broncos offense yesterday. I mean, really. They come out and they hit that pass to Troy Franklin. Did you expect that Sean Payton would just keep dialing up those kind of plays? Do you expect that him to pull out a fake punt every other drive? The thing that the Broncos needed to do more than anything else was be who they are. To ask Bo Nix to sling it around the yard would be a losing proposition, and that's what I chalk most of this up to. It's just frustration that the scoreline kept going the way it did, and the Broncos offense didn't interrupt Buffalo's scoring run. Right? I think that's what a lot of this is born out of. But to somehow blame the Broncos offense for losing that game is ridiculous to me. The defense was what lost them that game. The side of the football that was supposed to be elite. The Broncos all season long have been what they were on offense yesterday, all season. And you want that thrown out the window? Would it have made anyone feel better if Sean Payton would have recklessly called plays in that game, asked Bo Nix to rescue them, and the scoreline ends up the same except Bo Nix throws 4 picks? Because that could have happened. Okay, you saw enough of Bo Nix when he got a little bit outside of the normal offense. He's still a little bit careless with the football. He's still a little bit inaccurate. And you want to put him in harm's way in that regard so you could feel better about the Broncos playoff game because maybe they get one more touchdown out of it? If you want to put anything on the Broncos offense, it's they don't have the personnel. Because if Sean Payton could be, if there's anything about Sean Payton, it's that he's not conservative. Okay, this notion that Sean Payton is ultra conservative, he's not. But if he doesn't have the pieces to be able to be more aggressive from a play calling standpoint, he's not going to put his young rookie quarterback he has hitched not only his wagon, but his entire legacy as an NFL head coach to. He's not going to throw him to the proverbial wolves. On offense, it is absolutely a personnel issue. And it has been all season. Marvin Mims was a nice story, and I certainly think maybe some more Marvin Mims would have been certainly welcome for the Broncos. I'm not saying that you can't look at certain play calls in certain situations and say maybe there was a better play call there. I've been critical of Sean Payton's play calling against Cincinnati and against LA. it's kind of two different conversations. You want to pick on a specific play call, then okay, but just this overall idea that he needed to call the game with reckless abandon and just let Bo Nix air it out, that was going to end up equally as disastrous as yesterday ended up doing. At least this way, your offense and your young quarterback can save some face. At least you didn't destroy the confidence of Bo Nix. So it's an easy path to take, right? You see the play calling one way. It was quite conservative, like the Broncos have been the vast majority of this season and have gotten to this point with that kind of play calling, mind you, and say, well, they should have been more aggressive. The way that they were playing that game should have given them their highest probability of being in that game. To throw caution to the wind and air it out and do all this stuff, it would have been so unlike the Broncos that on that stage, they would have absolutely failed. There's no two ways about it. There is no scenario in which the Denver Broncos come in with a different offensive game plan and it goes any better for them. But again, I get the frustration. Right? I get the, got to go for it. You're getting killed. Just go for it. So again, maybe on a third down or a fourth down, we may feel like, but the overall premise of Sean Payton's offense has been the way it's been all season and has gotten the Broncos to where it is. And again, I go back to the defense and say, where's the defense that got the Broncos to where they are? I look at that offense. That's the same offense I've been watching all season. Trying, but mostly failing to run the football, protecting their young quarterback that they have the next at least 5 years invested in, if not longer. They've been doing that all year. I ask, where's the defense? Where's the defense that's supposed to be elite? If there's a coach to question, it should be Vance Joseph, more so than Sean Payton. Again, when a game happens like that, nobody is above questioning. But where were the adjustments? Joe Brady drank Vance Joseph's milkshake. He drank it up. There Will Be Blood. Great movie, by the way, if you'd like to check it out. Highly recommend. Joe Brady completely outcoached Vance Joseph. And the Buffalo Bills offense manhandled the Broncos defense. The supposedly vaunted Broncos defense. Sean Payton pulled out as many stops as you could reasonably expect him to. He went for a fake punt. He dialed up a big play on the first drive to try and hit Buffalo in the mouth. And I'm reading some things like that rattled Buffalo. It didn't look like it rattled Buffalo. It was more to give the Broncos confidence, I think. And it did until the Bills squeezed it out of them by marching down the field time and time again with little to no resistance from the Broncos defense. Come on now. The Broncos did not affect anything that Buffalo wanted to do. But we ended up at this point a few weeks ago. Right? And it's understandable. Once the playoffs are a real thing, Now it's like, okay, forget about the development of Bo Nix. This is about winning football games. Right? Because this season, if you recall, the most important thing was making sure that Bo Nix was worthy of the pick that the Broncos used on him and gave you enough to go on to say, moving forward, he could be our franchise quarterback, which he did. But once the playoffs entered into people's view, then it became, well, forget the development of Bo Nix. Forget what's best for him. Sean Payton was looking out for Bo Nix every day this season with very few exceptions, and certainly yesterday was not an exception. Could you imagine the conversation today if Bo Nix would have tossed 3 picks and the Broncos lose the game by a similar score? How that would take one of the most positive things about this Broncos team and ruin it? And I'm talking about the perception of it. The Broncos got their guy, and then he goes out in a playoff game and throws. Look at what they're talking about with Justin Herbert. He's played 2 playoff games. And already the conversation is what it is. What do you think that people are going to let up on Bo Nix? Oh, he threw 3 or 4 interceptions. No biggie. Of course they would. They go after him. Sean Payton did a brilliant job of balancing development of Bo Nix with winning football games. And I just see so many people last week and today wanting that to be thrown out the window just for the sake of making their Sunday more enjoyable. Next year will be the time to question the conservative nature of the Broncos play calling. Next year will be the year where you say, okay, time to let the training wheels off Bo Nix. And he did have training wheels on for most of this season. Next year will be the time to start to take them off. But yeah, I get it. Criticism all around, and it's frustrating when the Broncos do virtually nothing offensively, but make the main thing the main thing. And the main thing was Vance Joseph's supposedly elite defense with multiple all-pros did nothing to slow down the Buffalo Bills. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on yesterday's game. Continue with Drive Time Sports here in just a moment. In the meantime, want to let you know that if you're often feeling tired, lacking motivation and drive, maybe you're gaining weight or noticing a loss of muscle mass, these could all be signs of low testosterone. Don't wait. Find out. And find out at Low T Center. They make it easy to get your levels checked. It's a simple blood test. And with their on-site lab, you'll get results back right then and there, like 20, 25 minutes tops. They're not a typical doctor's office. They specialize in this with testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT. So you know that if you do take the test and you do have low testosterone, that you're in the right place to get it treated. They have over a decade of experience helping patients, and their personal treatment plans are optimized for you. And if you're a current patient, by the way, you can get a $150 referral credit for each new patient that you refer. So keep that in mind. So get back to your best. Go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment today. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. I'm watching ESPN here, and they're talking about Mike McCarthy. And they keep putting up that they couldn't come to an agreement on a contract. Like, if this was some financial thing, this was not mutually agreed to part ways. That's the other funny buzz phrase. And mutually agreed. We both agreed it's probably for the best. So who wants that Cowboy job? You know that the team that you will have is going to be good for like 11, 12 wins a year. Right? Because say what you will about Dak Prescott come playoff time, but Dak Prescott racks up the numbers. They score points. They're going to win a lot of games. But not going to advance in the playoffs. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott. So how many of these coaches have those kind of aspirations? Who I was thinking about this watching the Houston game. Like, whatever happened to Houston's offensive coordinator as the hot candidate? Everyone's just been talking about Ben Johnson. No one talks about the guy in Houston. And he was one of the hot candidates last year. But a bit of regression from CJ Stroud. And, not anymore. If Ben Johnson is the top offensive coordinator candidate, whoever the second one is might be a fit for the Dallas job. Or just somebody who's just looking. Maybe a Vance Joseph would be a fit for the Cowboys job. Like a retread, hired to be eventually fired, but, I'm sure Vance Joseph has learned some things and he'd probably be a little bit better the second time around, but clearly the defensive side of the football needs some help. And Vance Joseph did do some good things with the Broncos defense, despite the way they finished. There were some success stories in there. No, maybe a Vance Joseph is a good fit for Dallas, but add them to the list. And then take the Patriots off because they went Mike Vrabel. The Broncos now, after this loss, lose the one thing that they had going for them through much of the year. Let's be real. They were playing with a bit of house money through most of the season. The time that stopped or slowed down was when they beat Indy. Right? Then it was, well, they have to get into the playoffs. And they did. But now they're not sneaking up on anybody. The expectations will be really high. And the Broncos are going to have to go out this offseason. And they're going to have maybe the best offseason they have had in years. And they should be able to, by the way. Russell Wilson's contract, less of an impediment on their cap. Don't forget, they let other higher price veterans go. They have their first round pick. They have their second round pick. They got to go out and make some moves because they need personnel on both sides of the football. And they're going to have to be careful here with Bo Nix. Because the natural inclination, and it's been this way all season, is Bo Nix needs a veteran wide receiver. And I agree. We've seen this throughout the league. These young quarterbacks, they show you a little something in their rookie year, and you say, all right, that's enough for us to invest in. Here's a bunch of money thrown at a wide receiver, tight end, or something like that to help out the young quarterback. And certainly Bo Nix, with what he's shown this year, makes you go, okay, he's worthy of the investment. But you got to be careful. I don't think Stephon Diggs worked great this year, all in all, for Houston. I know he got hurt, but it's got to be the right guy, too. I mean, you look at somebody like T. Higgins, for instance. Certainly better than what the Broncos have. Right? T. Higgins automatically becomes the Broncos' best wide receiver. But let's not discount the fact that he was playing opposite of Jamar Chase. Okay? And you could say something similar about Chris Godwin. Now, I'm not trying to say T. Higgins nor Chris Godwin aren't worth paying. They are. But like Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill or some of these other names that have gone to other places over the years have proven to be like among the elite class of wide receiver. If it was bringing Mike Evans, now we're talking. With Chris Godwin, I would be, if I'm the Broncos, certainly willing to bring him in. And I think it would help Bo Nix, but can the Broncos bid top of market for someone like that with the other holes that this team has on its roster? Are they going to be I don't believe they will be the highest bidder for T. Higgins or Chris Godwin. I think they'll go after them. I think they would really like them on their roster, but I don't think they're willing to pay everything, because part of why the whole thing works with Sean Payton is that there's not just one guy. There's a lot of guys. He'll involve everybody. But we'll see how that goes. See how aggressive they get. Will they be the highest bidder for some of these free agent wide receivers? But this has to be, whether they choose to pay defense and draft offense or vice versa, this has to be the most productive offseason the Broncos have had in years. Because the expectations are higher now. The next stage in Bo Nix's development will be tougher than this one. Because they didn't draft Bo Nix to be a game manager. Okay, they drafted him to be a franchise QB. Sean Payton saw glimpses of Drew Brees in this guy. The Broncos should be... I really don't know another team in the NFL that should be more aggressive than the Denver Broncos. All their picks, money, and they got to be a pretty attractive landing spot. Right? That's the other part of this. If you're an offensive player, don't you want to play for Sean Payton? Don't you see enough with Bo Nix to go, okay, I could play with this guy? Got to be aggressive. Because the grace that they were extended for much of this season, that's gone now. In the wake of that, whatever that was yesterday, They got to make moves. They got to improve. And that starts here in the very near future. 719-24-7-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. How wild was that Washington-Tampa game last night? Holy smokes. And as starved as Broncos fans were for not only a playoff appearance, but playoff success, like, got to be honest, it's nothing compared to what Washington fans have been dealing with. That's a great win for them, and they get the doink that goes in. More field goals and extra points have hit the uprights this season than I can ever remember. It's been crazy. And one last night, but Jaden Daniels was terrific. Big mistake by Baker Mayfield on that fumble where he was trying to hand it off to McMillan. And I'll say this about Dan Quinn. If Washington loses the game, I think a lot of people are going to look at Dan Quinn's decision to go for it on fourth down after the when they drove down the field, the drive right before the one that Baker Mayfield fumbled. And I do think it was the wrong call. But it was the right call for them to go for it on the next fourth down, because it's, to me, if you get a turnover and it's that kind of house found money thing, like, you let it ride. And were the Commanders chasing the points that they failed to get on the previous drive? Maybe there was a little bit of that, but just in a vacuum, you get it, you cause a turnover or you get gifted the ball, because let's be honest, Washington did nothing to force that turnover. That was just a mistake by Baker Mayfield. You try to put that ball into the end zone. The previous drive, when your team drives all the way down the field, it's like, take the 3 points. But it all worked out. And now he joins a list of Russell Wilson, Mark Sanchez, and Joe Flacco as rookie starting quarterbacks to win on the road in their playoff debut. And what do they win? A date with the Detroit Lions next week. But yeah, these playoffs had about everything. We had some blowouts. We had everyone got in there. Why'd the committee let this team in or that team in? Jokes in. But it's the same deal. Right? There aren't enough really good teams in college football, and there aren't enough really good NFL teams. And I would expect the games to get better as we go along. Buffalo, Baltimore is going to be amazing. Both conference championship games are going to be great. I think they're shaping up to be, given the teams that are still left in the field. There just aren't enough good teams. You thin out the herd a little bit, separate teams a little bit. Pittsburgh, Denver, see you later. And we go on with the teams we expected to be here and have a little bit more faith in. Now, we'll get back to this at the top of the hour when it comes to who's most to blame for the Broncos loss. I'll just put this out there. No, I don't think that the Broncos should fire Vance Joseph. I saw the exchange on the sideline, Sean Payton getting mad at Vance Joseph. That's something you haven't seen for a while, but it's happened. I would put it this way. I don't think Sean Payton's going to lose sleep if Vance Joseph gets a head coaching gig. But I certainly don't think that he's going to fire Vance Joseph for this performance. I mean, all this is about expectation. Right? If you went into this thinking that the Denver Broncos were going to shock the world, then yeah, somebody's head's got to roll for that. They got embarrassed yesterday. But if you went into it noticing the signs down the stretch that this team was a byproduct of their schedule, then you just say, you know what? Improve the team, bring the core back, build upon it. And then next year is the year where there's real expectation, where there's real consequence. If the Denver Broncos end up doing this again, faltering down the stretch and getting blown out in a playoff game. That's not now. And I've been accused, I get it. Expectations go up and everything, but my expectations only went up so far as the Broncos have got to get in the playoffs. They had enough bad teams left on their schedule to get into the playoffs. But it was never high enough to say, well, they had to give Buffalo a run for their money. They weren't going to do that. At best, that was going to be a game where the Buffalo Bills were in complete control and the scoreboard would still be relatively close. Didn't end up that way, I suppose. Why were the Bills? Were the Bills running up the score? Like, do we ask? Because it's been asked of Sean Payton before. Do we ask if the Buffalo Bills were in complete control of that game and they're airing it out in the fourth quarter of that football game? No, I haven't seen anybody ask that. If the Bills were running it up. They got to get Josh Allen in rhythm. But yeah, yesterday was ugly. We'll get back, reset things here at the top of the hour. In the meantime, taking your thoughts at 719-247-1313. From the 719, final score was a blowout, but it was a game until that miraculous TD in the back of the end zone. The score was close. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that was a miraculous touchdown. How his leg did not hit the line or whatever to make that play out of bounds. That was miraculous. Like as miraculous as Devon Vele's catch just a week ago against the Kansas City Chiefs. Would you agree? That's the thing. The Broncos were not going to turn that game. But I was texting with some people yesterday, and I said that touchdown was ball game. The game was over at that point. But the game was already going in a direction where I did not foresee any real way that the Broncos could have pulled that game out. And I started the show by talking about Tony Romo kept saying the longer they stick around, but watch what's happening. Look what's going on. The Bills are moving the ball up and down the field at will, and they haven't even really unleashed Josh Allen. It was just like the Cincinnati game. And what happened in the Cincinnati game? Eventually, the dam broke, and Joe Burrow started lighting it up. Now, the difference was that the Bills' defense is not as poor as the Bengals, and the Broncos' offense could do nothing about it, like they could in the Cincinnati game. That was when the game was over, was when that catch was made. There was no coming back from it. No matter how much, maybe you and I disagree on the viability of a Broncos comeback before that touchdown. But we are in agreement that that was it. You could have turned that game off and been fully confident that there was no way that you were going to miss anything worthwhile. That was it. That was a wrap. Alex says Sean Payne has no business getting mad at Vance Joseph, Mr. Supposed offensive genius. Sean Payton, the offense only put up 7 points. Denver's defense won them more games than their offense this year. Sean Payne should be, thanking Vance Joseph. I think Vance Joseph did a lot of good, and I think both Sean Payton and Vance Joseph can be credited with doing more with less. But what I keep going back to is that we were told the Broncos defense was elite. No one ever said, now people said that Sean Payton was elite. And that's kind of what Alex is mentioning there. But no one ever looked at the Broncos offense and said, oh, they're an elite offense. People looked at the Broncos defense and said they're elite. So where was that? I think both Vance Joseph and Sean Payton can be credited with doing more with less. I mean, obviously they can, right? Because people, if you want to say me picking the Broncos to win 5 or 6 games is me being a hater, that's fine. But what about the people that make it their business out in Las Vegas to make sure that they set these over-unders in a good spot? I don't know what they ended up losing on the Broncos over, how many over bets there were, but they whiffed on the Denver Broncos. So why was that? Sean Payton and Vance Joseph doing more with less. And it was always the scheme, right? This scheme of we're just going to bring guys at you all the time. We're going to blitz. That was their whole identity. And against the Raiders and against the Panthers and the Saints, it works. But look at the quarterbacks they have gone up against in the last month or so. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. What do they have in common? All very good against pressure. But the Broncos got all this high sack number and all this kind of stuff because they committed more to blitzing than any other team in the league this year. So Vance Joseph had a great scheme that just was no match for quality quarterbacks. That's really what it boils down to. And they just couldn't bother Josh Allen nearly enough because he is largely unbothered. Like, you got to actually get to him. You got to actually bring him down. And there just weren't enough times yesterday where the Broncos were even near him. But that's where the split happens between what you have seen through 17 games and what you saw yesterday. Or even what you saw for the first few months of the season and what you saw for the last 2 months. Right? When this team was faced with their toughest tests, I think on the whole, everybody fell short. But I think it also causes you to go back and look and say, maybe this isn't exactly the reincarnation of the Orange Crush defense or the Super Bowl 50 defense. But I'm with you, Al. Like, there's no firing Vance Joseph. Okay, that would be absurd. Because he got the most out of his side of the football, just like Sean Payton did. And now it's the real work of, okay, we were a nice story this year that had some guys that no one ever heard of that burst onto the scene. Now we got to get more talent. Right? Because now teams are going to start to make sure that Nick Bonito doesn't get to him, or Zach Allen. They're going to need more talent. Inside linebacker, the secondary, even the defensive line, I think can all be improved. Another text from the 719. Crazy how things change. Bringing back Joseph is important. Continuity, morale, performance. You're absolutely. That's what this year did. This year got the Broncos off of that treadmill, got them off of that hamster wheel. It's no longer, should we fire the coach or should we fire the quarterback? It's no longer what do the Broncos have to do to be relevant. They're relevant. You have a starting point, and I liken this year a lot to that year that the Nuggets lost in game 82 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, obviously, it was the exact comparison would be if the Broncos had lost to the Chiefs week 18 and they were kept out of the playoffs, but there's still a lot of similarities, right? So that was a team that didn't ultimately go where you hope they would. It was a really difficult loss, a really bitter pill to swallow, right? You lost game 82 to the Minnesota Timberwolves to keep you out of the playoffs, all that kind of stuff. But that was the season where you knew that the Nuggets had something. Right? You had started to see Nikola Jokic emerge, and you saw, who Jamal Murray was, right? He was a very young player at that point. And you said, as disappointing as the end of the season is, they have something. They look like a lot of people wanted Michael Malone fired because of that. But the Nuggets saw, we got our coach. But more importantly, we got players and a core worth building upon. And that's what the Broncos season has done. And that's going to be the bigger story moving forward. Like this week, yeah, it's going to be about how they got absolutely outclassed in every form and facet they could by the Buffalo Bills. But eventually it will be, the Broncos have something here. They have something in Sean Payton. They have something in Bo Nix. They have some pieces, Surtain, Bonito, Allen, Meinertz, Marvin Mims with his emergence. Like, there's plenty of time to go over all of this stuff, but that's what this season is. There's no reason to blow it up. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel, but the urgency level also picks up, as it did for that Nuggets team. It would not have been acceptable, and it probably would have gotten Michael Malone fired if they had made the playoffs the following year. So that Nuggets team ended the season poorly, and there were a lot of angry people and a lot of blame to go around for the way that it ended. But the feeling once that initial emotion subsided was, okay, they have something here. They're moving in the right direction. That's where the Broncos are. That's what the story of this season is. The Broncos are back. Now, maybe you judge them being back by competing for Super Bowls. I don't. I'm saying that they're back relevant. They're back to contending for the playoffs. And now they got to go back in next year. They can't miss next year. Make no mistake about it. The Broncos cannot miss the playoffs next year. They have to get back in, and they have to afford themselves better than they did yesterday. But they don't. The way they accomplish that is not by radically changing what they're doing. It's just by adding to what is already there. And that's the spot the Broncos have not been in on this day. Yes, trust the process. That's exactly what I'm getting at. The Broncos process is right. They need to trust it, but also get a bunch of more good players. 719-247-1313. Get back after the top of the hour. Sorry, I got to reach for a paper here. We'll reset with the three big takeaways from yesterday's game. Continue to get your thoughts. Don't forget Minnesota and LA, final game of the wild card round coming up. Our coverage from Westwood One at 5:30. But in the meantime, want to tell you about QC Kinetics. Now, maybe you've been dealing with that chronic joint pain for so long that you just accept it as normal. Oh, it's the normal pain I deal with every day. But that doesn't mean it's actually normal. It's your normal. Shouldn't be. There's an alternative with QC Kinetics. Make the decision that you're not going to live with that chronic joint pain in the year 2025. They are the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. It is joint preservation. That's what they're doing here. They're preserving your joints. They're attacking the root cause of that joint pain. Other things like steroids, surgery, pain pills, they only address some of the symptoms of that joint pain. QC Kinetics goes right after it. Tens of thousands of people with pain have discovered these cellular treatments and are living their life again, and you can too. Call for a free consultation, 719-347-1988. That's 719-347-1988. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on a Monday. Ryan Kaufman with you. We got the Monday Night Football edition of Wildcard Weekend coming up at the bottom of the hour. Rams and Vikings. So much to discuss in the meantime. 719-24-7, 1313. Let's hit the three stories that are driving the show. All right. The three stories that are driving the show are my three takeaways from yesterday when it comes to the Broncos and the Bills. My biggest takeaway is that I'm not surprised by what happened yesterday. The warning signs were there for this Broncos team when they were going up against other quarterbacks who weren't as good as Josh Allen. And one that was Lamar Jackson. But this team had started to slow down, regress, whatever you want to call it. The warning signs were there that they were trending in the wrong direction going into that playoff game. And a team who has basically built themselves into a playoff team because of their ability to beat teams that aren't good enough to get to the playoffs, while losing to pretty much any team that's good enough to make the playoffs on their schedule. There was no way they were going to go into Buffalo and get that win. So I'm not surprised at what happened yesterday. So how about where does the blame go? A lot of people criticizing Sean Payton's play calling. Should it have gotten more aggressive when the game was starting to get out of reach? I think maybe there's an argument to be made. But what I would ask first and foremost, where is this supposedly elite defense? Where was this side of the football that was supposed to at least keep them in that game? That was the entire premise. It wasn't, hey, can Bo Nix match Josh Allen throw for throw? You knew that would be a losing proposition. It was supposed to be defense keeps it close and see if Sean Payton and Bo Nix can make something happen. Well, they didn't even get a chance. They made something happen, actually. On the first drive, they had the pass to Troy Franklin. And then after that, the Buffalo Bills just routinely marched down the field with little to no pushback from the Denver Broncos defense. And it wasn't even Josh Allen that was tearing them up. It was James Cook. The Bills didn't even really have to use Josh Allen if they didn't want to. James Cook did all the work that was necessary for them to win that football game. And it was like the Cincinnati game. I couldn't believe that Tony Romo kept saying what he's saying. And then the only explanation I can have is that he was just trying to keep people locked in and watching. But the idea that the Broncos would get more confidence, I got less confident in the Denver Broncos as the game went along. I don't know about you. Less confident as time went on. You telling me after Will Lutz doinked it off the upright that there was more confidence in the Denver Broncos? It was like the Cincinnati game. You knew that the dam was eventually going to break. And the Bills offense was really going to turn it on and they were going to start putting up points. And they did. So if we're going blame game here, I look to the defensive side of the football and say, you kept telling us that you were elite. You were one of the best defenses in the league. Where were you yesterday? If Josh Allen put up an MVP caliber performance, I think some of that you just go, well, Josh Allen. Wasn't Josh Allen. Now, for most of that game, it was James Cook. And that, again, going back to the warning signs were there, when the Broncos face a team with a quarterback who is a threat to run, that's when the running back on said team gets the better of them. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook. It's almost like they're too worried about the quarterback running. But James Cook did all the work that the Bills needed. So if you ask me the aspect of this team that I thought was the most disappointing, it has to be the defense. The offense just didn't have the time. They didn't have time. They didn't have the number of plays. The scoreboard wasn't in their favor. Like, you don't think that the Buffalo Bills would be looking for Bo Nix to start airing it out when that game started to get out of hand? It was Sean Payton, I think, still protecting his rookie quarterback, which the most important thing this season is that Bo Nix improved and Bo Nix developed, and he did. To throw him to the Wolves the last game in a game that the defense is even holding up its end of the bargain, I didn't see it. I get it. Some criticism certainly warranted, but I look at the defensive side and said they let down the Denver Broncos more than the offense did. Which leads to the third takeaway, which is not a takeaway necessarily from the game, although it's kind of born out of that. What we saw yesterday was how far the Broncos have to go till they get back to being a real contender in the AFC. That's the distance. 31-7. That's the distance here. How do they close that gap? Well, they close that gap with one of not only their most aggressive, but their most productive off seasons that they have had in years. The Russell Wilson contract isn't as big of an albatross going into year 2. You didn't give up any of your draft picks. George Payton's being commended for all the guys on this team that he drafted. Well, now guess what? You have first round picks. You have some cap space. Improve this football team. And my early thought is, I think they go free agency to get Bo Nix help. But the more I think about it, the less likely it is, for a variety of reasons. But I think that the Broncos' mindset would be one of them. I wouldn't hold your breath on Tyler Warren. I wouldn't hold your breath on Ashton Genty. I think this team is going to look defense with their first round pick. A guy that can play opposite Zach Allen and eventually replace Zach Allen. I think that's where they go. Because again, getting back to the defense supposedly being elite and got just destroyed yesterday, they need more help there too. That would be my guess. Go out and get one wide receiver. I think you bring back Sutton. I think he's earned that much. I think you keep Cortland Sutton around with the season that he's had. Marvin Mims, his emergence, you go out and get a guy, there's your 3 wide receivers. I think in the draft, and you can get one later. I'm not saying that running back's not important. It very much is, but you have seen that you can get running backs later. I think they need to address that position, or who knows? Najee Harris might be on the outs with Pittsburgh. Look at what Green Bay did with Josh Jacobs. And that's not even to say anything about Saquon Barkley, who it almost feels unfair to put that out there like there's some expectation the Broncos can get this year's version of Saquon Barkley. But as teams try to calibrate what they think of running backs, there might be a couple of vets that are available that with less of a workload, which we know Sean Payton will give them less of a workload because he wants to spread it out. Could a Najee Harris be really good with a Jaleel McLaughlin and Cam Scatterbo? Just throwing one. This is a deep running back draft. I would be shocked if the Broncos do not end up with a running back. And a running back that you look at and say, okay, he can be in the rotation. They got a lot of needs to address. But I think as of maybe even Saturday, the thought was offense, offense, offense. I wouldn't be so sure. But whatever side of the football they feel like they need to prioritize in free agency or the draft, they got to be aggressive. They got to add to this team because it's not going to be okay for this team to beat a bunch of bad teams so they get the 7th spot and then get embarrassed again. The bar has been raised, and they're going to need more talent in order to reach that. 719-247-1313. Carve out some time at the end here to get your thoughts in on this Monday. Lil Vikings-Rams thoughts, perhaps. And then speaking of, our coverage from Westwood One begins at 5:30. hour. Plenty of time to do a post-mortem on the Denver Broncos. And we will continue to do so. And certainly the sting of yesterday will not go away anytime in the near future. But eventually, again, it will. It will dissipate. And you'll be left with what was a season that not many people expected the Broncos to have, and has certainly set them up for future success. And I go back to this, like with the of the teams that got bounced this weekend, how many of them would you buy futures over the Denver Broncos? I mean, think about that. Tampa, Green Bay, Chargers, Broncos, Steelers. How many? And then we'll see tonight whether it's the Rams or the Vikings who are eliminated. I'm not saying who's better now, because the Broncos are the worst of all 14 playoff teams. Every team in these playoffs is better than the Denver Broncos. But how many of them are you buying futures of? Steelers, where are they going to go? How are they going to get better? You know, Green Bay, maybe you could chalk up, the struggles yesterday to Jordan Love's elbow and his wide receivers like dropping like flies. But like the Packers are locked in, they're paying their quarterback. Chargers locked in, paying their quarterback. I think that the Broncos are probably the team out of anyone, even with, regardless of what the result is here this evening between the Rams and the Vikings. I would say that the Broncos stock, the buying low idea behind it, I think they will be a better future to buy than a lot of these teams that kind of feel like maybe they're stuck in some kind of purgatory. Not good enough to truly compete, but not bad enough to get themselves a high enough draft pick to ultimately change their trajectory. But it's the two stories. It's what the Broncos season was and what yesterday was. And now we have an offseason. I believe we say every year this is the most important offseason. The Broncos, I don't want to label it that. I don't want to be completely unoriginal. I'll just say it needs to be the most productive. Right? They need to upgrade a lot of places on this roster. And then Bo Nix has got to be better than he was this year. And Sean Payton's got to trust him more. And they're going to have to open things up. But I don't think, given what happened in Buffalo, that we completely changed the perspective on the way Sean Payton handled Bo Nix this year. I think he handled him correctly. But having seen Drew Lock, how sideways it can go if the team trusts him too much, too early, doesn't give him what he needs to be successful. That's what this offseason is about. They're not going to change offensive coordinators, not going to change head coaches. But it's the next step, and there are a lot of steps between where the Broncos are and where the Buffalo Bills are. But be honest, you were just as much looking forward to Buffalo and Baltimore. Taking your fandom aside, as difficult as that might be, this is the matchup that we want to see. We want to see Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and I like Jim Nance's sentiment. Can we just wait to vote for the MVP till that game? That would be nice, wouldn't it? Get that. Chiefs will play the Texans. Bills, by the way, are underdogs. Looking early at the line, Bills are home underdogs against the Baltimore Ravens. Chiefs are significant favorites over the Houston Texans, showing that maybe Vegas felt like Saturday was more about Justin Herbert than it was the Houston Texans, which I would probably agree with that. Washington, Detroit. That's a fun matchup. And then we're going to get Eagles against the winner of the game you're about to hear here on Extra Sports 1300. I'm sticking with the Rams. It was a mixed bag this weekend for me. I got the most important game right? The Broncos game, I got that right. Thought the Chargers would beat the Texans. Then Justin Herbert happened. Thought that the Bucs would beat the Commanders, and then Baker Mayfield's fumble happened. Got the Eagles right, though. Got the Ravens right. What team did I say had zero chance of winning? The only team that I gave less of a shot to win this weekend than the Denver Broncos was the Pittsburgh Steelers. So a bit of a mixed bag, but I'll stick with the Rams. And it's more about what I think that the Rams are than what I think the Vikings aren't. The Rams, with the emergence of their run game, with the Kupp and Nakua with Sean McVay, I think this team could be dangerous, not just tonight, but dangerous next round too. And I'd be curious to see how much of what the Lions did against Sam Darnold in Week 18, the Rams try to replicate. And then wait and see if there's a play in the end zone with the possible face mask. Remember how that's how the last one ended. So we got Vikings Rams coming up here in just a couple of minutes. I do want to let you know before I go, and I'll be traveling tomorrow to Vegas. Going to try and do the show, but I'm going to be cutting it close. But I'll be in Vegas, Air Force women's basketball on Wednesday night against UNLV. But before all of that, I want to let you know if you're often feeling tired, maybe you're lacking motivation and drive, maybe you're gaining weight or noticing you've lost some of the muscle that you've put on over the last couple of years. These could all be signs of low testosterone. Don't wait. Find out at Low T Center. They make it easy to get your levels checked. Simple blood test, and with their on-site lab, you'll get results back right then and there. And they're not your typical doctor's office. They cater their treatment plans. They specialize in this first and foremost, but they cater their treatment plans to your own needs, including treatments that you can do at home, and you don't even need to come in. And if you're a current patient, don't forget Low T Center offers you $150 referral credit for each new patient that you refer. So get back to your best. Go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment today. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. I appreciate your patronage, and I appreciate your interaction. A lot of good thoughts, good text coming through on the line. I expect the conversation to continue throughout this week. For now, I will leave you in the very capable hands of Westwood One and bring you the final game of Wild Card Weekend. Vikings Rams in 2 minutes here on Extra Sports 1300.